Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Highlights. I'm Erin King, author, entrepreneur, and speaker, and I am so stoked to welcome to the podcast today one of my favorite badass women, Laura Gassner Otting, LGO. How's it going, bud?
How you doing? Good to be here.
Oh my gosh. Well, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. Turns out there are some limits. But for today, we are going to be talking about how we can ignore everybody, how we can carve our own paths, and how we can live our best life. And I just want to circle back on this awesome yellow cover, the Limitless yellow cover. And on the front of the cover, it says a counterintuitive, fast moving kick in the pants by none other than Amy Cuddy, the power pose gal. I spoke with her at iSpa a couple years ago, and she is one of my fave baddie women. And I just love her description. If she said this is a kick in the pants, it must be so legit. And I just read it the second time, which you can see all of my post-it notes and all of my actual physical highlights. So we are in for a treat. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things today, all about things like consonants and what that means for us, the difference between our value and our price, and talking about a great story at the very end of your book that gave me chills when I read it about climbing Mount Everest and the kind of parallels we can draw between today's times in this pandemic and the challenges that your friend Allison went through. So before we dive into all of that, I just want to say that my favorite thing about your book that I highlighted very first is that you said on page 2, you're already being counterintuitive and a little bit contentious and saying the trouble with leaning in. Now, for all of us gal nonfiction authors and keynote speakers, we are all Sheryl Sandberg, lean in. It kind of reignited the feminist movement, got everyone talking about who's sitting at the table and where. And I just love that on page 2, you said, I had a little bit of a problem with lean in. I actually had a different opinion on what it takes to be successful and what that looks like. And so I think what I loved when you said the problem isn't how we achieve success, but how we define success. Ooh, Laura, I just lost you on the video.
Sorry about that. This is now my turn to have technical difficulties, but I'm
Oh, there you
back.
are.
I'm
Okay,
back
cool.
because we are, in fact, limitless.
We are
Yes.
limitless. So you said the problem isn't how we achieve success, but how we define success. And that's an interesting reframing of our problem. So how do we, what does that mean? I mean, because aren't we all trying to achieve the success that we've defined? I mean, help me understand what you meant with that. I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah. So, look, this is nothing against Cheryl. She's amazing. She achieved an incredible amount of success doing things her way, which was saying yes to every possible opportunity as early as she possibly could, no matter the cost to her private life,
Mhm.
knowing that it would pay dividends later in her career. And that's awesome. And it worked for her. And honestly, it worked for me too. I did exactly the same thing, except with a few less zeros on my paycheck, obviously. That said, I got to the corner office. It worked. I succeeded. And I sat there in the corner office of this executive search firm, nationally, internationally known. And I was sitting there one day. I was the youngest vice president in the firm's history. And I was looking at my
Wow.
clients and I was looking beyond my clients out into the beautiful Boston Common Park, because, of course, I had the great corner office. And I remember looking at them and thinking, yeah, I can get this work done for them. Yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah, I'm going to serve them, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to bust through my numbers this quarter. It's going to be amazing. And
Yeah.
I was so concerned with, getting the next achievement and getting the raise and getting the promotion that I lost sight of what really mattered to me. And so my issue with Lean In wasn't how she achieved success, right?
Yep.
It wasn't the way that she went about it. It was the definition of success. And the definition of success being this one singular myopic, fastest and most expedient path to the corner office is the only one that matters. And
Mhm.
I got there and I was successful, but I wasn't happy. And I wasn't happy because I was in this place where I was thinking about the numbers and the promotion and the raise and the title and all of that. And I forgot why I was doing the work in the first place, like what made me
Mm.
actually really happy and why I really loved doing the work. And I wanted to get back to that. So my issue with Lean In is that leaning in can work for some, but it might not work for all. And for those of us who don't lean in, or maybe for whom it doesn't work, we're told that we're doing something wrong, like we're letting down the sisterhood or something, and that's just that's just not fair.
Mm. So I think that's so interesting because I can personally say that the least happy I ever was in my life, where I was losing hair in the shower, stopped getting my period, was having terrible night terrors, like grown up run around the house in the middle of the night, like nightmares for grown-ups exist. And
Yeah.
I was making the most money I've ever made in my life to this day. And I had this in the oceanfront office in Laguna Beach, and I had the 15 W-2s, and I'll never forget my taxes that year. I was like, "Wow, I'm paying more in taxes than I've ever made in my life," and I was miserable. And so, for those of you that are listening, if you're finding yourself saying, "I have it all and I have the success," I think what Laura and I are kind of raising the challenge is to ask yourself, "Is this what your definition of success really looks like?" And to give yourself permission to maybe explore that maybe it's not what you thought it was, and that that's okay. And I think what you've talked about a lot in this book, what we're kind of describing is this concept of consonance. And I first heard the concept of consonance from our mutual friend Tamsin Webster when
Mhm.
she explained that kind of what you do when what you do matches who you are. And you talk about consonance and you describe it as the sense of frictionless belonging, momentous stride, core relevance. Ah, a guiding force that reveals how your work, whatever that may be, contributes to your overall life's plan. I mean, I just get chills even reading that. I mean, it's what we're all in search of. And you break down the four elements of consonance. You talk about calling, which is a goal larger than yourself. You talk about connection, which are is talking about how your everyday work serves your calling by solving problems, reaching goals, or growing the bottom line. The third element is contribution, where you understand how your job or your brand or your paycheck contributes to your community, who you want to be, or the lifestyle you want to live. And then finally, you talk about control, which talks about how you're able to influence your connection to that calling in order to have a say in the assignment of projects, deadlines, colleagues, basically how you're able to offer input into the collective shared goals. And so those are the four elements you describe of consonance in your book. And when I read those, I was like, wow, that all makes total sense. And what would be my first step in going about trying to achieve that if I heard your story and my story and thought to myself, okay, I want that. That's how I feel. I see myself. Where do I begin to work towards those elements of consonance?
Yeah, so let me go back to the beginning of your question where you said that you first heard the word from Tamsin. It's funny because Tamsin and I've been friends for 10 years, and she used to talk about consonants in terms of messaging. Like if you are a marketer and you are putting a message out there, if it's not consonant, if it's not aligned with what your customers are looking to hear, then it's not going to work for them. And
Yeah.
I remember the first time she did her consonants talk, and I was like, oh my god, I've been talking about consonants for 20 years. Nobody ever knows this word. It's so great because I would walk into a client's office and I would say, yeah, you may want somebody who has a certain resume that looks a specific way, but the truth is they're going to be qualified, but they're not going to be consonant with your culture. It's going to be like organ rejection. And we all know those moments when we walk into a party, we walk into an office, or we're trying to figure out, whether something's the right outfit to wear to where we're going, and it just feels wrong. Like it just doesn't
Mhm.
feel like it works because there's like a misalignment. There's an argument between the two things, and that's a lack of consonance, right? Consonance is
Mhm.
it's this alignment. It's this flow. It's harmony. So if you're trying to, if you're in this place where you're like, something's missing and I don't know what it is, but I just know that it's not right, right? Like it's
Yeah,
just not
yeah.
quite
Just
right.
feels off. Yeah.
Yes. So the first thing to do is to not do what we've been doing, which is to go to all of our friends and family and say, "What do you think I should do?" Because what they'll tell you is what they think they should do, right? Like
Yeah,
think
so
about
true.
anytime, like when you were making all that money, you decided to leave the agency and to do something else. How many of your friends were like, "Erin, you're crazy. Why would you
All
do
of
that? You're
them.
so successful."
All of them, all of them. They were like, what are you thinking? I fired 2/3 of my staff. My very best friend, we were in Jackson Hole, we were skiing, and she goes, I think you're making a huge, and she loves me. She's incredible. I think she's actually watching, but she was like, you're making a huge mistake. And she was just looking out for me through her eyes, right? That was her version. So to your point, it's like our knee-jerk reaction is to look to others, but you're saying that it's the opposite is what we need to be doing, right?
Because here's what happens. You go up to somebody and you go, "Hey, I've got this crazy idea and I'm going to sell my company and I'm going to go do this instead." And they look at you and they go, "Oh my god, you can't do that. That's really
Yeah.
scary." And what they're
Yeah.
thinking is, "Oh my god, I can't do that. I'd be too scared." And so
Mm.
they give you advice that feels comfortable to them about the life that they've always been told is success. Get the car, get the spouse, get the house, have the children, send them to exactly the right schools, wearing exactly the right clothing. And we then conform to look like every single other person, but it doesn't work for us individually. And so the first
Yeah.
thing I tell people is the very subtitle of my book, which is How to Ignore Everybody, right? It's to
I love that.
stop giving votes to people in your life who shouldn't even have voices. Who are the people
Mm.
whose opinions actually make you a better person? Whose approval are you really seeking? Talk to them. Those are the ones who should be in your inner circle. Sometimes they're your friends, sometimes they're your family, but more often they're your family. They're this combination of friends and family that you've chosen along the way, and they're the ones who see your potential. They see your worth. They see your value, and they support your crazy ass dreams. Those are the ones that you should be asking for advice because they'll tell you what they see as your potential. They won't look at you just in terms of risk. Because you ask a family
Mhm.
member what to do, and they will be, they're going to give you advice, but their advice is going to be based on keeping you safe. And that's
Mhm.
fine, and it's lovely, and it's wonderful, but it's not going to get you to like the edges of what you're capable of doing.
Mhm. I love that so much. I mean, I struggle with the line between like, how do we know the line between ignoring everybody in a healthy way and ignoring everybody in a delusional way? Because sometimes I think I tend to err on the latter, unfortunately. How do we know, how do we know that how do we walk that line between our family that wants to protect us from saber-toothed tigers and then our truth tellers that are maybe maybe their reaction does have our best potential in mind, but maybe our reaction is just a reflection of them and how they're feeling about it. So how do we know? That's a tricky question, but you know what I'm asking?
No, yeah, I totally do. So when you tell someone your great dreams and they're like, "No, you shouldn't do it," that's usually coming from one of a few places. I mean, the first is it's coming from fear, right? It's coming that they're
Yeah.
scared themselves. It might be coming from love, right? They want to protect you. It also might be coming from jealousy, right? I talk a
Mm.
lot about the three lies that we tell each other, and one of those lies is like people aren't going to like me when they see the real me. And the truth is
Mm.
actually that one's not a lie. That one's true. The lie we're telling ourselves is that those people actually matter because the ones that are trying to stop us from doing things, whether it's love or fear or jealousy, they may have our best interests at heart. They may not have our best interests at heart. But the way that we figure out who is by asking ourselves this one simple question, which is, what will happen if I fail? So
Mm.
what will happen if I fail is that I'm gonna get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, then maybe we gotta listen a little bit more. If what's gonna happen if
Mhm.
I fail is, well, that business won't work, so I'm gonna probably go back to a, cubicle job and figure it out until I can get the next business to work. Well, then you have a plan B. So if you have a plan B, then you can pursue the plan A because you know that failure is not finale, it's just fulcrum. It's the place from which you're gonna learn and you're gonna grow and you're gonna get better. And there you are. So you've highlighted this section in the book. It's fantastic. This is one of my favorite notions, and you'll love this as a fellow speaker. The very first talk I ever gave from Limitless, I gave at Renaissance Weekend in Austin a couple years ago. Right, like it was in February, and the book was coming out in April. So it was like I was previewing the talk, and I'm going through my whole spiel, and I'm launching into, and failure is not finale; it's fulcrum. And then I look to stage left, and there's Commander Tim Kopra of NASA. And Commander Tim Kopra of NASA has gone on not one, not two, but three spacewalks. And I was like, failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. Except for you, sir. For you, it would most definitely be finale. But for the rest of us, so here's the thing. If you
That's
still
awesome.
have oxygen in your lungs, you're gonna make it. Like, we've survived all of our worst days so far, right?
Yeah.
And we've learned from them, we've grown from them, we've gotten better from them. So, if you're not gonna get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, then you don't have to listen to that advice. Everything else, you can say, "Okay, what will failure look like? What will I learn? Will this be finale or will it just be fulcrum?" And if you have a plan B, then you've taken care of plan B and you can just focus on the plan A.
I love that. I love because I've also heard people say that you shouldn't make a plan B, that it's like you should only make a plan A. Like there's only plan A. I've heard that before. I
I
don't know what
mean,
you think about that, but
yeah, like, there's a whole, like, burn the boats, right? If you burn the
right.
boats, you make a public commitment, you have to do it. You have no other choice. You have to do it so, you're gonna succeed because you can't not succeed. Well, yeah, that's all well and good, but if you've got, children to feed, if you've got a mortgage to pay, if you've got, sick
Yeah.
parents, like, we all have the economics of reality, and I think, uh I think that failure is always an option, and in fact, it's not just possible, it's probable most of the time. But if we
Mhm.
look at failure as, "Oh, that's a failure, so now I have to do plan B," then we're really reducing what we can learn from it because we only see it as bad. I don't see plan A, plan B, plan C, I just see it all as directional, right? Like, as long
Love
as
that.
there's forward momentum, if I'm learning something, then who knows? Because, when I first started off in my career, I went to law school. I thought I was gonna run for Senate. I thought I was gonna be the first female,
I
senator
would
from
have
the great
voted
state
for
of
you.
Florida.
I would have
Well,
voted for you.
I mean, but then I saw how the sausage was made, right? I dropped out of law school. I joined a presidential campaign. I ended up in the White House. Amazing, great, wonderful. But I never went back to law school. I never decided to run for office. Was that failure? Because I went on plan B instead of plan A? No. I actually, I would argue, was able to leverage and impact more change over the course of my career doing what I did. So it's not that I chose plan A or plan B. I knew that if everything fell out from underneath me, I knew that I could go back to school. I knew that there was like a safety net. But
Mhm.
beyond that, everything else is just directional. As long as you're still moving into rooms that have more doors than the room you just left, you are increasing your optionality. And
Yeah.
that is the only thing that we need to be thinking about. Will this decision increase my optionality or will it reduce my optionality? And if it's reducing it, you better be damn sure that you really want one of those options.
Mhm.
Otherwise, just keep creating more options.
Yeah. That's so funny because I even feel like in these times right now, I mean, I've been talking a lot about you can wait or you can create. You can wait till it's over, wait till it gets better, wait till it's a vaccine, wait for all these things, or you can create a new mindset, a new strategy, a new playbook. And for me, what you just explained, which was optionality, I'm using the word creating, but you're talking about options. And
Yes,
I am just determined to create my way out of this place. Like I'm just going to keep starting
100%.
stuff and writing stuff and making stuff and doing stuff because I'm trying to invent options
Yes.
when our current reality was kind of taken away from us. It's like, what's your other choice? I mean, sure, I sat on the couch and watched Netflix and ate white carbohydrates for the first time since the 90s. But the
Pandemic.
pandemic, man, oh God, it's real. And I'm paying for it now. But now, I mean, it's the only thing we can do is say, yes, and this happened. How are we going to create that optionality that you're talking about? And I think on page 57, what I love is you have this section called Find What Fuels You, and not
Mm.
in a carbohydrate way. Find what fuels you. And you said, calling is your own personal higher purpose. Calling is your own personal higher purpose. It can be an overarching motivation, a goal to reach, a problem to solve, a societal ill to remedy, or a worthwhile cause to serve. It can be a bottom line to meet, a business to build, a brand to love. It is the direction of an overall goal and the particular pride that you attach to the value of that goal. I love that you used the word pride at the end of that sentence. Let's unpack that a little bit because you're talking about purpose and pride in the same paragraph, which I've never really heard those two terms coming together in a singular concept.
Well, I hear from people all the time like, oh, I want to go do something for my community. I want to have purpose, but I need to make some money. I need to pay off my debt. I need to do this, that, and the other before. And I'm like, well, maybe then that's not your purpose. Maybe your purpose is making a ton of money And maybe you could just give money, write a check once a month or once a
Yeah.
year to charity. And, as somebody who spent 20 years doing executive search for nonprofit organizations, I feel like an unimpeachable source on this sentence that I'm about to say, which is you can do well and still do good. You can make money as a career with a career in the nonprofit sector. You can also make tons of money outside of the nonprofit sector. And if what you
Mhm.
want to do with that money is give it back to a cause you love, fantastic. If what you want to do with that money is buy a Maserati and a beach house, that's cool too. That's your purpose. It may be that your purpose is just being the first generation of your family to get out of debt so that your children can make free decisions. It may be that, your purpose is that you want to, spend half of your life on the beach. Awesome. That's great, right? Like keep my number. Like I'm a really good I'm a really good house guest. But I think that we get stuck with this idea that the only pride that we can attach to purpose is if we're giving the shirt off of our back to poor kids in need. And that's just not true. Your purpose is
Mhm.
just your purpose. Some of people's purpose will be curing cancer. Some people's purpose will be buying a Porsche.
Yeah.
Awesome. Fine.
I always wonder about the term purpose as a singular thing because I feel like it's a little bit limiting sometimes. And I know
Oh
that
yeah.
I mean, a purpose is this is the goal. And so I don't mean to sound like a flaky older millennial, but I like the idea of the multi purposes,
Yeah.
like different seasons, different times. But I guess, how do we know if we've found our calling? Maybe we were chasing it down and it was serving us and the world. We were doing good and doing well. And how do we know? Is that restless, itchy feeling that we all get where it's time to maybe discover a new calling or a new purpose? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things we get wrong is we think that you are born with a purpose.
Yeah.
Like you only have one purpose in your entire life and that's
Yes.
it, right? Now, I mean, I would argue that every one of us has lots of different purposes all the time. So, my purpose when I was 20 years old is different than my purpose when I'm 30. It's different when my purpose when I'm 40. It'll be different in my purpose next year when I turn 50. Our purpose continues to change. And I think
Mhm.
maybe it's like every 7 to 10 years. It's sort of like every generation, like it continues to change. So, your purpose may be launching a business. Your purpose may be getting involved in a societal ill that is making you crazy. Your purpose may be nurturing a family. Your purpose can be anything. It's just your purpose. And so I think we get itchy because we've been chasing down a purpose and we get to a point where we're like, all right, I feel like I've done this now. I feel like I've done
Mhm.
this as well as I can do it. Like my purpose was to get somebody elected, right? My purpose, like I wanted to get Bill Clinton elected president. That was like my overarching. I heard him talk about this idea of community service in exchange for college tuition, and I was like, oh my god, that needs to happen right now. Like
Mhm.
it was like a
Mhm.
lightning bolt moment. It became my purpose. And then I went to go work for him, and I could have stayed in the White House, but I did the unthinkable. I left before the second administration because I
Mhm.
had done what I'd come to do. That was it. That was my purpose. I'd served my purpose. And so then I went to go work in search because, I'd like to say it was because I my purpose was to put the right people in the right positions, but the truth is I met the man of my dreams and he was moving to Boston and that's where the job was. And so he
Aw.
became my purpose. Like that became the thing that was most important to me in my life at that moment. And then while I was at that firm, I had this moment of rage where I was like, I could do this better and faster and smarter with more authenticity and integrity than these, old dudes in this old office with their old way of thinking. So I launched my own business and my purpose became being an entrepreneur, creating something, being my own boss for the first time ever. Fast forward 15 years, I hadn't learned anything new in a while. I sold the business. I wanted to like my purpose was like I just needed to like grow and change and continue to expand. And then I found this world of speaking and writing. So my purpose has shifted a
Yeah.
lot. It's always had the same kind of general idea of like putting the right people in the right place so that they can be the best version of themselves and help change the world. But, like, it's if you look at it in a granular level, it's changed as I've changed and as I've gone through different phases of life. And I think that's true for every one of us.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think what Lara's saying, for those of you who are listening, is that if you're finding yourself struggling with this topic of what am I supposed to be or why am I here, that's okay. And there can be multiple answers and seasons that make sense personally or professionally. And I find that sometimes when my professional purpose is clear and I'm chasing it down, sometimes my personal purpose feels a little foggier. But then
Hmm.
other times I feel like when my personal purpose is so clear, whether it's like you fell in love with your husband or caring for an elderly, sick member of your family, or you have a girlfriend that is not okay, or a tribe that needs your work, whatever it is, I feel like I rarely have both purposes firing clearly at the same time. I usually feel like one or the other is kind of pops up at a time. So it's like you have multiple purposes, maybe one at a time, and maybe sometimes it's personal and sometimes professional, and guess what, that's all okay. We have to judge
Yes.
it, we have to just go with it and not feel like we're behind or we haven't figured something out that everyone else has on Instagram, which is bullshit, or any of that kind of self-limiting crap that people tell themselves. And so especially in these times, I feel like, I had a gal in my tribe, and I was posting about chasing down your dreams and going for it. And one of these, I was like, had, a coffee in me and just finished my workout and finished my motivational quotes. And, when you're just like really on fire and I'm
Yes.
preaching into the Instagram live. And this girl's like, just so you know, for some of us, just getting out of bed today was a huge accomplishment. And I was like, okay, noted. And that's a good thing to remember, is that it is also this sliding scale, going back full circle to your original point, which is that what success looks like for you is what it looks like for you, full stop. You
Yes.
know, so I want to talk for a second about, I love what you said on page 83, because I think in this time, a lot of us are reinventing, whether you're an entrepreneur, small business owner, whether you're a speaker, former speaker, whether you are a
Hopeful
realtor.
speaker.
Yeah, whether you're a hospitality person. I mean, gosh, I just sent an email out to my list on Tuesday, and I got 412 bounce back emails. I hadn't sent an email out in about a month and a half, probably 2 months. And I am going through these messages, Laura, and every single one is furloughed, fired, furloughed. I was bawling, crying. All my Freeman
Mm.
friends and my Hilton friends and all hospitality and travel. And it was such a gut check where here I
Yes.
was complaining to my girlfriends, my she noters. I was like, I hate virtual. It's like you don't get your like standing ovation energy. Like when? At least you have a job. Like check yourself,
Yes. Yes.
So it
Yes.
was a big moment. But I think that in this time, whether you're reinventing personally or professionally, what your new normal, I hate that phrase, but whatever a new phrase for new normal looks like, a lot of it does come down to, can you pay the bills? Can you pay the mortgage? What is going to put food on the table for you and your family? And so on page 83, you have this paragraph that's called Know Your Value. And that hit me between the eyes, because for those of you who are listening, if you are a speaker or an author, we are struggling right now to redefine our value within our industry, just like many other industries. Academia, colleges. Do you pay the same for online tuition as in person? Do you pay the same for a Zoom call with Laura and I if we're not on stage pouring into you, sharing our hearts out? So there's this paragraph that you talked about, and you said you have a salary, or what a gig costs, or whatever costs, and you think that's your value, but it's really something else, your price. So what's the difference between our price and our value?
Well, so this all came down to the very first talk I was ever hired to give, and I came home from the talk. I was on stage for 45 minutes, and I flew home, and I walked into the house, and my husband's like, "How did it go?" And I was like, "I can't believe they just paid me that much money for 45 minutes of work." And he was looked at me with this look on his face that could only be described as like astonishment or maybe disappointment at my, my naivete. And he was like, "Laura, they paid you that much money for 25 years and 45 minutes of work." And
Ah,
I was like,
boom.
"Oh," because the amount of money they paid me was my price, but the 25 years and 45 minutes of work was my value. And I think what happens, especially to all of you entrepreneurs who are listening, is that we try to race to the bottom and we're like, "I'll just do it like my competitors, but cheaper." And what happens
Yeah.
is we give them this really low price, but we're also giving them this really low, assumption of value. That's, again, I come out of politics, so perception is reality. And if they think that your value is low, then your value is low. right? So
Mhm.
I tell people all the time that when they're thinking about negotiating a contract or salary increase, or even just for a job or for a gig, to think about what it is what's the value that you're bringing, what is the cost of the problem that you're solving, right? How
Mm.
much value are you bringing to them? And if they're trying to solve a problem that's $100,000 problem, then you charging them 10,000 or 20,000 for that contract, that's
Yes.
like pennies for them. They're getting
Ah,
away scot-free. So it's really understanding the value that you bring rather than just what the market will bear for the price. And what I find is that if you actually talk about the cost, the investment in terms of the value versus in terms of the price, it changes the conversation completely.
I love that. I wish I'd talked to you a couple days ago because I'm taking on my very first consulting client in like 5 years. I used to do consulting all the time via my agency, Socialite. We were constantly coming in, working with Visa, Siemens, Hitachi, you name it. But I've been speaking full time for the last 3, 4 years. And so now my consulting is to multiple people on stage.
Mhm.
And so times are different and virtual sucks and it's cheaper and more work and all the things. And I'm like, gosh darn it. Well, when the times get tough, the tough get going. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do a consulting client. Fine, right? So it's this awesome company that's like super rad. I adore the executive team. I use their products before even having this conversation. So the alignment's there, and I'm putting together this proposal, and I struggled so much with the pricing, Laura, because I kept thinking, is this too much? Is this, and I don't think of myself as someone who I teach selling. I've been a salesperson my whole life. I'm a 3-time entrepreneur. I've raised 7 figures of capital. I've asked for the money, but it's just something still, even in chargers like us, you still have that stutter step of, am I worth this? Is this okay? My friend Pamela Jett, I called her and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe it's this pandemic or poundemic or whatever, but I am stutter stepping on this 6-figure price tag for this consulting gig. And she looked at me, she goes, if you don't think you're worth it and you don't think your value's there, they won't. So you better get your head right and put that vibe out there because they can smell it a mile away. If you're kind of like, is this okay? Versus like, yep, this is what I cost. Play elevator music and stop talking, right? Like,
The worst thing that we do though is then we talk to our friends and they give us that pep talk and then we put the proposal together and then we send it in an email. And what do we write in the email? Let me know if this is okay. Question mark.
it's funny. I put that in the email and I deleted it because I had that same. But because we want to ask. It's kind of like on page 79. You talk about this idea of faux humility, and I
Mhm.
feel like it's almost like digital faux humility. What you're talking
Yes.
about, where we're sort of pumping the brakes a little bit, like we are woman. Hear me roar, consultant, and then you're like, right? But is that okay? Because there's this thing that you said. I love this. In praise of ambition, ambition has gotten a bad rap of late. It's a dirty word, even more so if you are a woman. Oh, she's so ambitious. Ooh, I feel attacked. Part of the reason, part of the reason we've lost ownership of our unspoken dreams is we've been persuaded to allow our ambition to be subsumed into something that is more socially acceptable. Faux humility. Then you go down and say the guilt of ambition holds us back and keeps us from becoming limitless. There's so much there. Why do we do that? Why? Because I will say this, Laura, the faux humility. So when I worked in corporate between my second and third company because I got into $70,000 of debt running payroll on my credit cards was a whole terrible thing. But anyway, I ran social media for auction.com, which is a Fortune 500. And it was an all male white executive team. And I was the only gal in the boardroom. And I was 15, 20 years younger than the youngest guy at the highest echelon. And I found myself when I charged in like aggressive East Coast gal with like the game plan and the spreadsheets, like, let's do it, boys. There was a visceral reaction versus when I would do like I don't know, is that okay? I'm just saying, oh, just a thought, all these kind of like faux humble language. I found, unfortunately, my experience, that they responded better when I played by the socially accepted gender norm because I came in a 26-year-old female surfer girl package that I didn't have the same gravitas at the table. So it's this weird balance that you want to be effective, but you don't want to play by the rules. You want to be unapologetically ambitious. So how do you balance that?
Well, the first thing I do is I ask myself this question. Would having more money, more leverage, more time, more power, more opportunity more anything, allow me to serve the causes that I love and care for the people that I hold dear even more than I already do? Right? Would having more of any of those things allow me to show up better in the world in the way that I want to show up? And the answer, of course, is yes. Right. So I already know that it's not my ambition, it's my responsibility. And
Mm-hmm.
when I phrase the aggressiveness, the want, the need, the desire in terms of responsibility and not in terms of ambition, it feels to me a little better. It feels like, okay, well, I have to do it. I need to do it. I have to show up for those people. I am a show up kind of person. That's who I am, right? So if I'm going to be a show up kind of person, then the way that I do that is by going out and being the best version of myself, getting the most, doing the most that I can do for those people and for those causes. So the first thing I do is I sort of shift the thinking away from it just being this just ambition, because ambition for what sake? Ambition to get the title, ambition to get the salary? No, I want to have the title because the title gets me into better rooms. I want to have the salary because that allows me to dress better or donate more or go on better vacations where I can meet more interesting people on the ski lifts or whatever it is. It just gives you that ability to elevate. So that's the first thing I do is I take that away.
Okay.
The second thing that I do is I understand that my walking into a boardroom is going to intimidate the hell out of people. Now, like you, I'm athletic and I walk into a boardroom, I walk on stage sleeveless. I show my muscles. I wear 4-inch heels. I
You
don't
have
wear
great arms, by the way. Your arms
Thank
are
you.
incredible. Look her
Not
up
right
online,
now.
people.
We're gonna get back there, but not a pandemic, man. It's
Full
happening.
on, full on gun show. Keep going.
But I know that when I walk in, there is a certain reaction that I'm going to get. So, do I choose to walk in wearing like a big giant, moo tent and hide who I am, or do I walk in and own it? I walk in and I own it. And
Mhm.
I know that I'm going to get a certain reaction from some people. So, what I do is I make sure that those people feel really cared for and really loved up before we go into the meeting. So, I pre meeting the meetings, because if the most powerful woman who scares the hell out of them in the room has gotten their counsel ahead of time, and I don't get their counsel. They're like, "Oh, I don't know. Please help me, damsel in distress" way. I get their counsel and that you're the smartest person that I know. Can you give me the feedback on this before we go out and we talk about it publicly? And then suddenly they're an ally. Then they're a
Yeah.
champion. They are excited. They want to show me off. Every man who's intimidated by a strong woman, it feels even better when he's like, she's a badass and she's my
Mhm.
badass. So,
Yeah.
you got to like play the pre-meeting game sometimes. But that advice goes for men and women, right? Like
Mhm.
Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and we're merely players. So you got to do like the rehearsal happens before the meeting itself. It's just the victory lap, right? It's like
Yeah.
any athletic endeavor you've ever had. The actual competition is the victory lap. You already know what's going to happen. You've done the work, you've done the workouts, you've done the nutrition, the hydration, the plan, the strategy, all of it.
Mhm.
You've built the muscle, you've done everything you need to do, and the actual game day is just execute the plan. You already have
Yep.
the plan. You already know where all the plays are going to go. You already know where the players are going to be. Meetings are exactly the same way. And I think, selling business to our clients is exactly the same way also. You don't just
Mhm.
go on and like hope for the best. You have all the
Mhm.
pre-meetings that happen behind the scenes so that what plays out is like, okay, and now he's going to say this, and now she's going to say that, and now I'm going to go, oh, wow, amazing.
Okay, let's talk about game day. You have a great story at the end of your book on page 137, and you're talking about this gal, Allison, who I don't know, but I need to know her. Allison
Alison
Levine.
Levine, yes.
Levine. So she was captain of the first American Women's Everest expedition sponsored by Forbes, former Goldman Sachs. And this story in Laura's book is incredible, talking about her leading an all-female expedition up Mount Everest. Um, and then, not to spoiler alert the story, but there is part of the story where you say they had everything it took, but Mother Nature took everything they had. So I guess they went to the top of Mount Everest, but they were really close, and then the weather was too bad, so they had to come back down. And so you said success in your career isn't filling up a bucket of gold stars or landing a perfect on paper job or even marking all the check boxes set out by others. Success isn't getting to the top of Mount Everest. It's getting back down to the bottom alive. So here's my question. So many questions. The first question is, when people are talking about in these times, let's not just survive, but thrive. Maybe just surviving sometimes is a big enough success when it's game day, no matter how much you pre-meeting prep.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think everyone, in the beginning of this, people were like, "Oh, we're all in the same boat." And then it was like, "Well, we're not actually all in the same boat. We're all in different boats." And there was like, "Well, okay, we're all in the same boat. We're all in different boats. We're all in the same storm." Well, it turns out we're not all in the same storm either, right? So, we're all in different boats, we're all in different storms, and we're all in different houses because we're all socially distant. But every one of us is going through this very differently. Some of us are coming into this with lots of family wealth. Some of us are coming into this with tons of debt. Some of us are coming into this with incredible mental health. Some of us are coming into this already with depression issues. Like, everybody's experiencing this very differently. And
Mm-hmm.
so I say this knowing that sometimes just getting out of bed is victory enough on some of those days. That said, I spent the first month of all of this thinking like, all right, well, I'm just going to like go to ground, and I'm just going to start creating, and I'm going to start building, and I'm going to like make things, because when this is all over, I want to, best case scenario, I'll be able to get back on stages, and I'll have all the stuff that I made will just, be there as like side income. Worst case scenario, that's going to become my new portfolio. So I know I have to do it anyway. I might as well just do it. And I was doing it, and it was great. And then I got to the end of putting together this course that I had created. And when I finished the course, it was like I almost didn't have a North Star anymore. I didn't have that one big thing that I was trying to create. And when I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have that, I kind of lost my way a little bit. It was like, well, what am I going to do today? What should
You
I
and I
work on
talked.
now?
We talked during that time. Remember, we had a big conversation with the quarantine questions about this exact topic. I remember that. And
Yes.
we're motivational speakers and we were completely lost. Anyway, keep going.
Yes, and so, I started going live every day to, my Facebook group, and I got to this point where I was like, I feel like a fraud. Like, I'm going on stage, quote unquote on stage, but I'm going live every day to my Facebook group being motivational when I'm kind of dealing with low grade depression issues, right? Like, I'm dealing with some of that stuff myself. And so I do think it's important to survive this, but I think that there are lots of ways where each of us can thrive. And I think that is this great reset. Like, I don't like calling it the new normal either, because you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. I rejected the old normal, so I'm not going to accept the new normal, right? Like, why would I
Well,
why would I
we
do that?
we reject all normal of all
Yeah,
categories, truthfully. So,
absolutely. Absolutely. So the great reset. So if you were like, when life goes back to normal, is the normal that you're going to go back to the life that you really want? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And so, if the answer to that question is no, then what can you be doing right now? The answer shouldn't be, I'm going to write the great American novel, or I'm going to build a business out of scratch, or, I'm going to, move to the woods and build my own log cabin. The answer should be, what is the problem that I want to solve in the world? Right?
hmm
What is the thing that you care about? What is like the thing? And then from there, what is the solution that that problem needs that you can actually bring to bear? And then what's the best way for you to do it? Is it by,
hmm
having conversations? Is it by learning more? Is it by expanding your network? Is it by taking speaking to a different medium? There are so many ways that we can reset what we're doing in ways that are meaningful to us, that maybe we're not thriving, but it's sure a whole lot, beyond just surviving.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly the hybrid. That's the intersection that I think we all are striving to exist in. And what you brought up that's interesting is, if you're listening to this and thinking to yourself, what problem am I solving personally or professionally, with my family, with my career, with my own time? What problem am I solving? The beautiful opportunity, talk about opening up boundaries and being limitless, is that the number of new problems that we're all facing, that number of problems is limitless. I mean, there is like so many new things that we are all dealing with. And whether you're a mom trying to homeschool and work and be a human, or you're a speaker who's a performer and you're learning everything digital. I mean, or if you're, I mean, looking at the political landscape, which is a shit show. I mean, there's so, like, we've never, 2020 is the first 6 months has been a little bit of, I mean, chock full of problems. So, I mean, step one is like, I mean, I'm going to do this myself. Step one is when we get off this conversation, sit down and write down the problems that you see in your everyday. And I think I'm going to be surprised at what shows up on that paper, because starting from there, it does feel like you're moving away from survive and towards thrive, because there's a whole new crop of issues that are 2 seconds old. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint and an investor standpoint, it's all about, this is a new problem. How can we make it better? So I'm curious to see what we discover, especially with our clients being meeting planners and our tribes, and their needs that they had a couple months ago just aren't the same, you know?
Absolutely, and I think, I think for me, because I didn't know what to do every day, I kinda lost structure, and when I lost structure, I just started, like,
Yeah.
I stopped, eating healthy, I stopped exercising, I, put on my COVID-15, everything just kinda went to hell, and what I realized was that COVID wasn't the problem, my creativity was the problem, my lack of creativity, and
Mm-hmm.
my understanding that, I used to get on a stage and speak. I'd get on a plane, I'd get on a stage, and I'd go and I'd speak, and that would be great. And I couldn't do it. So it was like, well, am I still a speaker? Am I not a speaker? What am I now? And then I realized, well, I can still speak and I can do it with my webcam and my mic. And suddenly the potential audience could be huge. But I was
Yeah.
limited by my own idea of what success looked like for everyone else. I was watching all the other speakers we know, and I was watching them put together, these great sound stages in the garages. And I was like, well, I can't do that. I don't know if I can do that. I'm not really sure. I don't know if that's for me. So I was defining success by everyone else. And it wasn't until I stopped and I said, well, what does success mean for me? Success doesn't mean for me speaking to, this association and that conference. Success for me is changing one life, is having one real conversation with somebody who,
Mm.
is impacted. And if I can do that over and over and over, that's going to be really fulfilling for me. Now, if I'm going to do that, what is the work that I need to do in order to make that happen? And that really started to define how I approach the work in a much different way. And so,
Mm.
for it was sort of like physician heal thyself, right? Like I had to take my own medicine. I had to think
Yeah.
about if that's the
You
calling
had to
that I
read this.
have. Yeah, I had to go back. I had to go back and think about it. And it's really funny. People ask me why I wrote Limitless, and I wrote it because I needed it. Right? I wrote it because I needed the book. And so
Mm-hmm.
I if you go through the sections of it, one of the four C's of consonants is contribution. And I really had to do some thinking about, well, how do I want this work to contribute to my life? Yes, I want to make lots of money. I'm a princess. That's just what it is. I did 20 years of executive search for nonprofits, but I always did in a for-profit organization. So I want to change the world, but I like 800 thread count sheets. I mean, I'm a princess and I had to make sure that I had that, as part of the contribution. But I also wanted the work to contribute to my life in a way that it was super flexible. Like I've got, one kid who's in 10th grade, one who's rising into 12th grade, and we have a lot of things to talk about this year in terms of, college and applications and all of that in this crazy application year of COVID. So I want to be able to be flexible and to be home. So do I want to recreate something that's just going to put me back on the road again as soon as it's over? I don't know, probably not. And it really made me stop and think, like, what are the problems that I want to solve in the world? And one of those problems is that I want to make sure that I'm here right now for my family in this important time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think what's interesting is that what I heard you say is, when you found yourself feeling limited, when the author of Limitless found herself feeling limited, she did the best thing that any one of us can do. So if you're feeling limited and you are identifying with the pandemic, which I was right there with you pound for pound with my elastic waistband pants, and a big thrive for me these days are just jeans with buttons, truthfully.
Mm,
I think that what you did was you said, what do the people around me need? How can I mean, the best way, you said, take your own medicine. The best way for you to heal, if you're listening to this and you're feeling limited, is for you to take the focus off yourself. It's almost like the best self-help in some points is being selfless and flipping the mirror around and looking around you externally. Who can you serve? Who can you help? Who can you be there for? Who can you call? By the way, just calling someone, not texting, not social media likes and comments and all that behind the screen crap, but actually putting aside a 20-minute conversation to just check in with someone with no agenda. Like, what can you do to just love the people around you and serve people around you to the point that all of a sudden you turn around and you're not feeling so limited. You are feeling more limitless because you're putting those deposits externally into the world around you. And I love that that's where you started, because, with self-help and with books like that we write and that we read and that we live, sometimes the best answer is just to take the mirror, turn it outwards, and just start to serve. You can't go wrong when you show up and serve. So I love that that's where you started.
Yeah.
Um, it's so good. Well, Lara, this book is awesome. I loved reading it the second time. What if success doesn't equal happiness? It's a great way for people to stop and reframe what's happening and realize that even though we feel limited right now, you are limitless. It is within your control to respond to the things that you can, and to keep showing up and keep climbing Everest and keep, pushing yourself, and go back to those 4 C's. Go back to the calling, connection, contribution, and control, and make yourself a little grid and see how you're showing up in those 4 areas. And I think I'm certainly gonna do that when I get off this conversation with you. So yeah, this is awesome. Any kind of last thoughts on how we can continue to be limitless going forward?
Yeah, well, I would say if people are listening, they're like, well, I'm not even sure where to start. I would say you've got two options. You've got the really easy option, which is the like just getting out of bed in the morning option. If you go to my4questions.com, it is a 4-question quiz, super simple, and it will tell you what you're missing in terms of calling, connection, contribution, and control. If you want to, that's the survive, right? If you want to thrive, there's actually a harder, longer 60-word or 60-question quiz at limitlessassessment.com. And that one actually will walk you through tons of questions. And at the end of each one of them, you get beautiful PDF, several pages each, that actually tell you a little bit more about calling, connection, contribution, or control, and some very specific tips on what to do to get more of each in your life right now, even during COVID.
Fantastic. Well, I will be signing up for that for sure. And I'll put that link in the show notes as well for our listeners. So, Lara, before we jump, tell me who is a nonfiction author right now that you are reading or that you're digging on that we should check out for highlights.
Oh, well, I would say my girl, Carrie Lorenz. I think you know Carrie. She's the first female F-14 fighter pilot in the Navy. And she was the one who basically handed me my ass about my book and told me that I was way too smart for it just to be good and it needed to be great. And I needed to keep working on it before she would blurb it. So she is the person who never lets me settle for mediocrity. And she's also the person who sort of keeps me calm and keeps me thinking about what's in my span of control, which, hint, hint, is the name of her next book, which is coming out this fall. So you should definitely have her on.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I will definitely give her a shout. She is so rad. I'll never forget seeing her on stage at Influence last year, and she rocked the house. I mean, girl crush to the max. So we'll definitely see if we can get on her schedule. Lara, you are limitless, and everyone listening now has great tips on becoming limitless, even in these crazy times. And everyone just, along with me, is sending you so much gratitude and thanks. And for everyone listening, we hope that this conversation has been the highlight of your day, because it has certainly been the highlight of mine. Thanks so much, Lara.
Thank you.